Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my June 2019 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but right now we're just talking about the books. If you're new to my channel, you might not know that this is not my usual filming setup. I'm currently visiting family on the other side of the country, so you will hear screaming throughout this video because I have nibblings and they make sounds and they run around. I'll do my best in editing, but there's gonna be sounds. This month I participated in the Queer Lit Readathon and Prideathon and basically any excuse to read queer books, and then also Summerathon, which was pretty hilarious. As well as Faerie Thawne, because Melanie is my favorite pan and I would have done that anyway. I'm going to start with the nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. I also have nowhere else to put my computer, so it's just going to hang out in this video with me, because let's not even pretend that I memorized all of this data. In June I read 26 books for a total of 7,073 pages. This takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so 1,732 of those pages were actually about 44 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 12 adult novels, 10 YA novels, 3 middle grade books, and 1 children's book. I read 17 novels, 2 novellas, 6 graphic novels, and 1 anthology. This month I read a lot of contemporary and fantasy with a little sci-fi, spec fic, historical fiction, and non-fiction tossed in. If you adjust by page count, you can see that contemporaries were all novel length. Most of these books, no surprise, came from the library, but I got one from NetGalley and another ARC from the library. I read 9 paperbacks, 6 hardcovers, 5 audiobooks, 5 ebooks, and 1 uncorrected proof. Most of my books were in the 300 to 399 page range, and the majority were 2019 releases. Most of these books were by female authors, and the protagonists had a variety of genders. In terms of setting, most of these books took place in the United States or other worlds, but I also had reads set in Canada, the United Kingdom, Qatar, and Equatorial Guinea. In terms of diversity, this was obviously destined to be a queer month, but I managed to find some other forms of rep here and there. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 2 3-star books, 5 3.5-star books, 9 4-star books, 4 4.5-star books, and 6 5-star books. Let's start with the lowest rated book and work our way up to the highest, shall we? As I said before, there are 26 of these, so I'm going to try to get through them fairly quickly because I do not want this video to be over a half hour. My 2 3-star reads this month were both for the Queer Lit Readathon. The first one was La Bastarda. This was a novella set in the 1990s or early 2000s in Western Africa. And basically my biggest problem with this one was that you didn't have enough time with the characters for their progression to make any form of sense to the reader. It felt like the character realized that they also liked girls and then immediately fell into this circle of other girls that like girls who kind of met out in the woods. And because of this quick and strange pacing, I didn't really have time to care for the characters. My other 3-star read was A Taste of Honey. This one was written in a very non-linear format, which I didn't really have a problem with, but for whatever reason it didn't really grab my attention. This goes back and forth between about a 14-day period where these 2 men fall in love, and one of those men in the future. The format makes a lot more sense once you get closer to the end and understand what's been going on. And this wasn't a bad book, it just wasn't my favorite thing. On to my 3.5-star reads, the first one being Umbrella Academy, Volume 2, Dallas. This one, when I originally talked about it in my weekly wrap-up, I was like, what even happened in this one? I can't even remember. This is a time travel story having to do with JFK. And then also these 2 murderers that are trying to kill one of the people in the Umbrella Academy. This volume and this series in general is dark and gruesome, which I don't necessarily dislike, but it's also something that is very hard to explain without just telling you the entire plot, which I'm not here for. Next, for Faerie Thawne, I read Tithe, which is the first in a trilogy. This is a portal fantasy where the teenage protagonist realizes that there is a Fae world and that those fairies that she used to play with when she was a child are in fact actually real. I had fun with this one, both with the plot as it was intended and also just kind of laughing at how this was definitely an early 2000s book and how there were at least 3 breaths that the protagonist didn't know she was holding. This was also written long enough ago that the protagonist thought that smoking was cool, which is just not something you see in YA anymore, for good reasons. I'm looking forward to continuing this trilogy, and thanks to my friend Derby from Derby Lane Reading, I can actually do that wherever I am because she bought me the bind-up on Kindle. Thank you, Derby! Next was the Backstages Volume 3. Instead of being one continuous arc, this one has stories based around Halloween and Valentine's Day. And I just love these boys. They're just so adorable, they're so cute. I want all of their stories all of the time. If you don't know about this series, it's about a group of boys who work the backstage of this theater program at an all-boys school, but it's kind of fantastical in that there are these weird rooms in the backstage that just go to magical portals else to elsewhere. It's kind of like the dude version of Lumberjanes set inside. Next we have The Luminous Dad, which I read because the protagonist is going caving for the entirety of the book, and I used to be a cave tour guide, although I was not a cave tour guide that would take people through sumps and down long pits or anything like that. I just kind of took people inside, showed them around, and left. But it was a lot of fun to read a book set entirely in a cave. The protagonist kind of lied to get her spot on this expedition, and it's an expedition of one. She only has one person that's talking to her on a radio, and she's trying to get through this entire cave by herself, and she doesn't know why. She just knows she's going to be very well paid if she happens to survive. This had some great horror elements to it, so there is a monster that's in the cave that you don't know if you're going to come across it. Also just the horror of all of your technology failing and you possibly just dying in this cave. She's also by herself the entire time, or thinks that possibly somebody else is in the cave but doesn't know if that's true or if her brain is just tricking her. And all of those elements mixed together were really interesting, but I found that the longest passages where she wasn't talking to the other person back at base were the passages where I started to fall asleep a little bit, which was really annoying because I was interested and I wanted to read it, but I kept falling asleep. My final 3.5-star read was Hot Dog Girl. This is about a girl who works at an amusement park during the summer with her best friend. She's got this whole scheme to date this boy who already has a girlfriend, so that was problematic. But then she also finds out that the park is closing down after this summer and she wants to save it. If this book had gone through the entire way and nobody pointed out how problematic she was being, I would have hated it. However, she made a lot of terrible, terrible decisions and they were challenged throughout, and I actually really enjoyed how this turned out. I just definitely had problems with the, well, I'm gonna try to date him even though he has a girlfriend. Although to its credit, when you have a subplot like this, the book usually works really, really hard to make it seem as though the other woman is terrible and doesn't deserve him, and this didn't do that to the extent I've seen before. We even start out meeting that character and knowing that she's working as a princess and she's actually always been very nice to the protagonist, so I appreciated that we didn't have that girl-on-girl hate thing that you see a lot. On to my 4-star reads, the first one being The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman with illustrations by Chris Riddle, which were gorgeous. This is one of 2 things on this list that one of the librarians pulled off a shelf and said, "You would enjoy this, please read it now," and I did. This is a graphic novel kind of in picture book format about Snow White and Sleeping Beauty, and it's got some twists on those classic stories. And there's not much else to say besides I really enjoyed how he played with those stories. I know that at some point this was marketed as a queer story, and it's not. There's just a moment where 2 female characters happen to kiss, which does not make it a queer story because they then go their separate ways. And I honestly don't know the background on all of those shenanigans. I don't know if it was a marketing problem where they decided to be like, look at this queer content and it's not really queer content, or if somebody else decided to say, hey, this has queer content when, not really. But as long as you go into this not thinking it's some big queer love story, I think you'll be fine with it. Next, I read an arc of Super Sexy Fun Times. This was a bind-up of 5 graphic novel stories based around superheroes or supervillains getting it on. It was super not safe for work. You will definitely see genitalia. And what I really appreciated was there was variety in what was happening with the stories, both to do with the kind of sex that people enjoyed. People were talking about consent. There were different kinds of partners. It was fun times. It was also very smutty. Next we have Everything Grows. This is about a character growing up in 1993 who first identifies as a lesbian, and as we continue on, doesn't really know how they want to identify with their gender. And of course in 1993 you can't just look this up on Tumblr. This is written in a diary format because somebody else in the protagonist's town has recently committed suicide and he actually used to bully her. And because her mother has also tried to commit suicide, the protagonist and the bully's mom actually end up in the same kind of grief group. And through this we find out that the bully was actually writing a diary addressed to the protagonist. It was an interesting format, although I really wish there was either a very realistic diary or we took the diary aspect kind of out of it. I kind of wished it was one or the other and not this kind of in between where, yes, she's writing diary entries to this bully character who is deceased, but nobody actually writes like that in a diary. I would have liked more of an extreme one way or the other instead of this kind of in the middle, but either way I enjoyed reading the story, obviously. Next we have Every Day by David Levithan. I finally got around to reading this one. This one was about a protagonist who wakes up every day in a different body, and one day falls in love with the girlfriend of the body they happen to be in that day. They have no control over what body they are in, and they are in a different body every single day. So going back and finding that girl is a challenge. Also, interacting with that girl and having to explain that they are in a different body every day has its challenges as well. This book had some interesting things to say about gender and how people judge other people based on their appearance. There was also definitely some phobic commentary from the love interest, and then there was also this whole subplot about one of the hosts thinking that he had been possessed by the devil, so there's a religion aspect to this as well. It was not perfect, but it was a very interesting premise, and I enjoyed seeing how it played out. There are also sequels to this. I have not decided when I'm going to read them, if I'm going to read them. Next we have Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. The two titular characters meet in college. She is eccentric, and every time they see each other in college, basically she's done something embarrassing. So she thinks that even though he is perfect, they'll never be able to date because she's kind of undateable. She's got this whole thing where guys initially think that she's a lot of fun, and then after a few weeks of her still just being her, they think that she's going to mellow out, and she doesn't. So she kind of figures that she's not in his perfect league, so when they meet up again years later, she decides that they should be best friends instead. She's single, he becomes newly single, and they decide to take each other on blind double dates. So many shenanigans ensue, but at least they get to hang out with each other and really bond. But as at least one of their dates points out, they are on the wrong dates at all time and should be dating each other. I enjoyed this. I love that Hazel was a complete weirdo. It's very relatable to me. It was a pretty sweet story, and I look forward to actually reading more from this author duo because it's the first time I've read a Christina Lauren. Next we have Tell Me How You Really Feel, which is a female-female hate-to-love romance that takes place in a prestigious high school. Essentially, this is queer Gilmore Girls, and I was living for it. One of the girls is a loner filmmaker, the other one wants to become a surgeon and is also a cheerleader, so is seen as much more popular. So when the cheerleader character asked out the filmmaker character many years ago, the filmmaker character thought she was making fun of her and immediately decided to hate her. However, the cheerleader character was absolutely serious and is now just mortified that the person they have a crush on hates them. Circumstances arise so that these two characters have to work together on the filmmaker's final project, and romance ensues. The characters have very different backgrounds, but also have a lot more in common than they initially think, and I really enjoyed seeing them come together. Next we have Feral Youth, which is a short story anthology that was edited by Sean David Hutchinson. It features stories by 10 different authors, but what is interesting about this is there's kind of this extra narrative that weaves all of these short stories together. Pretty much my entire family woke up with colds this morning, so the nibblings are extra whiny, so if you can hear that meltdown that's happening, I'm sorry. Essentially, these 10 youth are dropped in the middle of the woods and told you have 3 days to get back to camp because they're at this camp where they're supposed to like learn to be nicer humans, basically. It's like a juvenile detention type of situation. And one of them says, this is gonna be super boring unless we tell each other stories, and I've got $100 for the best story, so just tell me stories, basically. It's kind of a YA version of Canterbury Tales set in the present day. This framing device made the short story collection much more interesting to me, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't like all of the stories, but I enjoyed the vast majority of them. Our group book for the Queer Lit Readathon was We Set the Dark on Fire. This is the first in what I think is going to be a trilogy. It's the first in some form of series though, because the second book was recently announced and it looks beautiful. This book is set in a world where the elite men get 2 wives, one to raise the children and one to kind of be his strategy analyst, is what it feels like. And all of this is based on the religion of the island and this whole big backstory to do with gods. And our protagonist has been raised at this very prestigious school to be one of these types of wives. But nobody knows that she's actually an illegal immigrant to the area and shouldn't technically be eligible for this school, let alone being one of the wives of one of the very prestigious families. So when some rebels come to her and tell her that they know that she's not supposed to be there, she ends up having to spy for them. She also ends up realizing that she likes women. This is a very interesting setup, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing where the series goes from here. My last 4-star read was Prince Charming by Rachel Hawkins. This is the first in what I hope is a very long series because I very much enjoyed it. Our protagonist is a teenager in Florida, and her older sister went to the UK to study and ended up falling in love with a prince. The only problem with this scenario is this disrupts our protagonist's life because there's constantly people trying to basically get her life story and paparazzi things, and her prom date tries to sell their prom photos to make a quick buck. So when it turns out that her older sister and the prince become engaged, she ends up having to spend the summer in Scotland before the wedding. Basically so the palace can keep her stories under wraps. This prince is a lovely guy. He has a couple of younger siblings who are twins, a boy and a girl. And there's this whole theory that our protagonist is going to want to get with the other prince, which makes no sense because they're about to be related. Like, I get it, there's a history of royalty marrying their family, but come on now. I really enjoyed this story. I especially enjoyed their father. He is an ex-rock and roller who had like one hit in 1992 and is a recovering alcoholic, and he is absolutely hilarious, and the main character gets some of his snark, and it's just fantastic. I also read this specifically so I could read the next book, which just came out, and I actually have it on my phone as a download to read on this vacation, so I'm very much looking forward to it. That one features a female-female romance between the princess and another girl. We are down to our final 10 books of the wrap-up. Oh my goodness, there's still 10 books left. Okay, we can do this. 4.5 stars, let's go. The first one is called If I'm Being Honest. This is about a girl who has finally just decided to tell this boy she likes him, and then they get interrupted by this other girl having a terrible night. And because the protagonist is so stressed out, she actually just says something terrible to this girl, which makes the boy think that she's not a great person. She then goes on this campaign to basically convince herself and others that she is a good person. However, this other girl is not taking her apology, and it turns out she's actually done a lot of terrible things to other people, and she should apologize for those as well, and chaos ensues, essentially. What I really appreciated about this book is the protagonist is not a nerd whatsoever, but other characters are, so there are references dropped that the protagonist does not understand, but if you're a nerd and you happen to be a nerd about those things, you get it. There was a Battlestar Galactica reference at one point. I'm pretty sure there was a Dr. Horrible reference at one point. There's lots of talk of Rocky Horror Picture Show. And those are just the ones I can remember. I'm sure there were other Easter eggs. This could have easily been a narrative of the girl wants to change so she can please the boy, and this kind of played with that format and twisted it a bit, which I appreciated. Next we have The Seafarers Kiss, which is a bisexual retelling of The Little Mermaid that also includes Loki, so honestly, do you need to know anything more besides it's amazing and you should read it, and I really want to read the companion novel now? This was delightful. It had a major twist that I did not see coming and really appreciated, and now I just want to see where it goes from here. Next we have Brave Face, which is a memoir by Sean David Hutchinson. This is about him growing up in the 90s and realizing he is gay, and also talking about his depression. It comes with a whole host of trigger warnings, including internalized homophobia, homophobic language, as well as self-harm and a suicide attempt. So if any of that is not going to jive with your mental health, do not feel like you have to pick this up. However, it is a very powerful read. He wrote this because he wanted to be honest with himself and actually went back to old emails and notes and that type of thing from this time period, but also as a book that just shows that it gets better. Because it's one thing to say that, and then it's another thing to show a life where he really hit rock bottom and came back from it. And not saying that it hasn't been up and down since he hit rock bottom, because it definitely has, but this focuses on his life kind of up until he attempted suicide and then just a little bit after that. And it does do a quick summary of the ups and downs of his life post-hospital trip, but I felt that keeping it contained to his adolescence makes it very relatable to anyone growing up right now and realizing that they might not be straight, or that they might have some mental health issues, or both. Next we have Soar Adam Soar, which is a trans memoir co-written between Adam and his father. The majority of this text is written by Adam's father, Rick, but it is also interspersed with his social media updates. And I already knew going into this that the subject of the memoir had passed away. I didn't know how, and I didn't know that it was going to make me cry so many times. This book is about Adam's life growing up, his transition, living with epilepsy, having brain surgeries, and unfortunately his death. To give you a brief example of how heartbreaking this book is, the cover is actually a photo Adam took of himself moments before he died. This book celebrates Adam's life and what happened after he died, and if you want to read something that's going to make you cry, this is it. On to my 5-star reads, the first one being a children's picture book called Ogilvy. This is about bunnies. You know, it's my usual reading tastes. In this world, bunnies either wear dresses or they wear sweaters, and the ones that wear dresses do certain activities, and the ones that wear dresses wear other activities. The main character wants to be able to do both activities, so on a daily basis decides what they're wearing is either a sweater or a dress. This confuses the other bunnies, and they tell them that you have to pick, and basically the protagonist is like, nope, I want to be able to do both, and I should be able to do both, and it's decided that yes, you should be able to do both. This was the second thing that one of my librarians was like, you need to read this, you're really going to enjoy it. She hasn't been wrong yet. Next we have Ivy Aberdeen's Letter to the World by Ashley Herring Blake. Absolutely adored this. Obviously everything at the end of this list is the top of my month, so I don't know why I keep saying that, but I need to say it every time because I loved it. At the beginning of this book, Ivy's town is hit by a tornado, which unfortunately takes her family house away. The one thing she happened to save was this sketchbook where she had been drawing all these pictures of girls holding hands, but then it goes missing and the drawing starts showing up in her locker with notes. She kind of hopes that the person putting them there is the girl that she has a crush on, but she actually has no idea, and she's really stressing out about this because nobody knows that she likes girls. Ashley Herring Blake has this great way of mixing sweet stories with personal tragedies and people just trying to figure things out and families coming back together and people talking about their feelings, and I just adore everything I've ever read by her. Next we have Bloom by Kevin Panetta. This is a graphic novel about a boy that works in his family bakery, but he wants to go off with his friends and move to a bigger city and be in a band. Before he can do that, he needs to replace himself at the bakery, which he tries to do with Hector, but then he starts falling for Hector and doesn't know if he wants to leave now. The art in this book is beautiful. It's this wonderful monochromatic blue color throughout, and every so often there are these gorgeous 2-page spreads where it's just a montage of these characters doing simple tasks together, and it's just honestly so gorgeous. The other Ashley Herring Blake book I read this month and also gave 5 stars to was The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James. As we open this book, Sunny is waiting for a heart transplant and receives it. Since the age of 4, Sunny has been living with Kate, who is her biological mother's best friend, and she actually hasn't seen her mother since then because her mother is an alcoholic and has gone off to be treated or to live her life. Sunny doesn't really know, and at this point kinda doesn't want to know, kinda wants to know, has just decided that her mom is a mermaid, and since she is not a mermaid, they can't be together. Recently, Sunny and her best friend have also had kind of a breakup. They don't talk to each other anymore for a reason that you find out throughout the course of the book. So Sunny has decided post-heart transplant that basically she needs to get a new best friend and she would like to kiss a boy. This new girl comes into her life and makes her question whether or not she actually wants to kiss a boy. Like all of Ashley Herring Blake's books, this is adorable, but then also deals with really hard topics, and I would protect Sunny with my life. The penultimate book on this list is Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali. I read this as an audiobook, so it had 2 major narrators, and then S.K. Ali also had a couple of things narrating because this is written back and forth in different diaries between Adam and Zainab, but then occasionally the author also has some entries. Essentially, this is written as though the 2 main characters have written diary entries and has given the author permission to change their actual diary entries into narrative entries, which is a step I really appreciated because if you remember back before when I was talking about Everything Grows, reading somebody's diary is never a narrative thing, so the fact that we have this step of these were diary entries and now they are narrative entries, I appreciated that. Adam is traveling from London to Doha to visit his family, and Zainab is traveling from the States to visit her aunt in Doha, and they happen to meet up in the London airport and then also meet up in Doha. These characters form an instant connection in London because they're both Muslim, which means that when they get to Doha, they run in the same circles, which is how they find each other again. There's so much to love about this story. We have Zainab going through all of these microaggressions in her school because her teacher is completely Islamophobic, and I think it's very valuable to see that experience happening. We also have Adam, who dealt with his mother dying at a very young age and him having a diagnosis his family doesn't know about, and also get to see how he converted to being Muslim when he was 11 years old. The story is beautiful. My friend Sajid was shouting about it from rooftops for very good reasons, so everybody just listen to him and read this book. And it wouldn't be a monthly wrap-up without my camera battery dying before I get to the last book, which we're currently at. My favorite book this month was actually something that somebody else read for Queer Readathon and then recommended recommended to me afterwards, and I immediately downloaded it, listened to it, and fell absolutely in love. My favorite book this month was This Is How It Always Is. This book centers around a family that lives in the Midwest and then later moves to Seattle after a tragic event. Penn and Rosie fall in love. He is a writer, she is a doctor, which is an absolutely lovely combination that comes up over and over again within the narration. They decide to start a family together and pretty rapidly have 2 boys and decide to try one more time to get a girl, and of course when that happens, you get twin boys. They try one more time for a girl and they get Claude. However, from a very young age, we find out that Claude would prefer to be Poppy. This book is honestly just so beautifully written, not because it's absolutely perfect, because the characters do not do perfect things at all times. There is definitely strife that happens throughout this book. But one of the things that I appreciated the most is with 5 kids, you would think that they would kind of get lost in the mix and they wouldn't have different personalities that you could definitely remember later down the line, and I remember the different personalities of these different children. This book is filled with love and these characters just wanting to get along as a family, and there's just so much that happens, and I don't want to go into specific plot points because I don't want to spoil anything for you. I just want you to know going into this that Claude and Poppy will go back and forth between which pronouns are being used. And at no point is that because the family itself is trying to say that this child should be one way or the other, or they don't accept this child. The family 100% absolutely accepts this child and just wants this child to be who they are. They just want to make sure this child knows who they are and has figure out exactly who they want to be. The tough thing is I always feel like I'm never giving enough credit to my favorite book of the month. I always feel like I'm saying things and they're just not enough. I just feel like I'm saying words, and it feels like the more strongly I feel about a book, the less articulate I am about the book, which is very frustrating. So really at this point, all I can say is read this book. The writing is fantastic. It's beautiful in these intimate little moments between characters, and I cannot stop saying how much I really enjoyed it. If you want to hear me talk more about these books, or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always linked down below. If you've read any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye.